If someone had told me that a life could be turned upside down in exactly 13 seconds, I probably would have laughed. But that morning, right as my hand touched the pine wood wall of the cabin I had just bought, right as the feeling of freedom was starting to warm in my chest, 13 seconds later, a phone call turned it all to ash. My name is Clara Winslow, 68 years old, a widow who spent the last of her years trying to find a place that truly belonged to her. And that morning, I thought I had finally found it. The little cabin rested on the side of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where morning mist drifted like breath in the cold air, and sunlight threaded through the trees like strands of gold. I remember catching my reflection in the bathroom mirror, an older woman with silver hair, tired eyes, but still holding a faint spark, like an ember refusing to die out. I smiled to myself, a smile I hadn't seen on my own face in years. Freedom. I felt it. Soft, warm, simple like the cup of hot tea in my hand. Every dollar I used to buy this place, even the loose change I tucked into envelopes the whole year, made me proud. This was the only thing I owned after a lifetime spent in cramped rooms, long, lonely days, and years of being treated like unpaid help in my own family. That morning, I ate my first breakfast in the tiny kitchen, a slice of bread, a little butter, hot tea, and the sound of mountain bluebirds outside the window. I watered the wildflowers I'd bought on the drive up. I opened the living room window and let the mountain wind toss my silver hair around. For a few minutes, I truly thought life was finally being gentle with me. Then the phone rang. The screen lit up with one name, Lillian. My daughter. I answered with the smile of a mother who still hopes her child might say something kind. I was just, Mom. Her voice was sharp, almost clipped. Get ready, we'll be there in an hour. I blinked. Beware. 19 of us are coming. We're staying 2 weeks. Make sure everything's ready. I stood there, frozen. 19 people? Lillian, this cabin only has 2 bedrooms. Don't exaggerate. She sighed as if I were the one being difficult. They're family. You have an obligation. Obligation? I didn't even get a chance to breathe before she continued fast, like reading a grocery list. Ariel's bringing her 4 kids, Damon and his wife with their 2, Aunt Rowena, Aunt Jolene, Uncle Travis, Uncle Wade. Grant says to have plenty of towels ready. The kids will want to swim at the lake. And make lunch, please. I felt something hollow open in my chest. But I don't have enough food. I just arrived this morning. I haven't even... Mom, please. She cut me off, her voice turning cold. Don't be selfish. This house is too big for one person. We're helping you not be lonely. We're already on the way. And she hung up. No goodbye. No thank you. No asking if I had money, strength, or even a choice. I stood in the small kitchen, stunned. The warm little space from minutes ago suddenly felt like a cold storage room. I looked around. 2 bedrooms, 1 small sofa, a fridge with almost nothing in it, just a few eggs, some milk, a little bit of produce. A dish towel sitting on the table where I'd wiped the flower pots earlier. Everything small, simple, and just enough. For me. But for nearly 20 people, it would become a battleground. A storage room. A free hotel. A place I had poured every bit of savings into. A place where I would have no say at all. I braced my hands against the counter and tried to breathe. I didn't have much money. I didn't have enough food for even 1 day, let alone 2 weeks. I couldn't prepare beds for nearly 20 people, and I couldn't go back to my old life, where I was always the one obeying, serving, enduring. But none of that, none of it hurt as much as the words, "You have an obligation." Obligation? To who? To people who treated me like their maid. To people who never once asked what I needed, what I wanted. I sank into the chair by the window. My heart pounded so loudly I swore the cabin could hear it. 1 hour. I had 1 hour before they arrived and swept away the first peaceful moment I'd ever had in my life. I looked out at the sky above the mountains. A strong gust of wind rattled the tall pines outside the window. And for the first time in years, I heard a small sound inside me. A sound only those who've endured too much for too long ever recognize. Not this time. Not anymore. If this story reminds you of someone, or if you're wondering what happens next, hit like and subscribe so you can walk with me through Clara's journey. Because what comes next is more than you think. I pushed myself up from the chair by the window, trying to steady my breath. 1 hour. Just 1 hour before they arrived. 1 hour to prepare for something I already knew I couldn't possibly prepare for. I walked around the cabin, opening the fridge, the cupboards, every drawer, as if a miracle might be hiding somewhere. There was no miracle. 3 eggs, a bit of butter, half a bag of salad, a few bruised apples, an open bottle of milk. In the pantry, 1 can of soup, half a bag of rice, a little pasta, and an almost empty bottle of olive oil. I stared at everything, then at the clock. 55 minutes. This kitchen was made for one person, for an older woman living simply, eating modestly, and ending her day reading quietly in a rocking chair. Not for 19 people treating this place like a free resort. I opened the cabinet with dishes. There were 4 plates. 4. I let out a small, helpless laugh, a laugh that stung behind the eyes. I brushed the tears away. No, I wasn't going to cry over this again. I'd already spent too much of my life crying over things that never deserved my tears. I looked around again. 2 bedrooms, each with the simple bed I'd just made that morning. The small sofa in the living room wasn't even long enough for me to sleep comfortably, much less survive a night full of footsteps, arguments, screaming kids, or the TV blaring until dawn like they always did. I could already picture it. Shoes piled at the door, suitcases dragging across the new wooden floor, kids fighting over toys, adults talking loud enough to shake the walls. I'd lived through enough of those scenes before. In the old apartment they invaded like storms, but this time, there would be no escape. About 50 minutes left. I pulled out my wallet. I knew exactly how much I had, but some part of me still hoped the number would change. $285. I took out each bill carefully, as if I were counting the last remaining pieces of myself. I sighed. That amount couldn't feed a small family for 2 weeks, let alone nearly 20 people. But I knew I couldn't greet them with an empty fridge. If I didn't prepare anything, I'd be called irresponsible, selfish, unpleasant. The same words I'd heard my whole life. I looked out the window. The dirt road winding down to town curved along the mountain like a thin brown thread leading to the only place where I might buy enough food to satisfy them. I grabbed my keys. There was no other choice. My old car rattled down the steep road, the engine sounding as tired as I felt. I glanced at the clock, then at the trees passing by. Tall pines, low ferns, wooden cabins of neighbors I hadn't even met yet. Everything looked peaceful. A kind of peace I knew I was about to lose. I parked in front of the only grocery store at the foot of the mountain. The old wooden sign read, Danford's Market, since 1952. Inside, the aisles were small and modest but clean. I moved through them like someone being chased. A bag of rice, a pack of pasta, some canned beans, cheap vegetables, a large loaf of bread, some juice for the kids. Each item hurt a little. Not because of the money, but because I knew the people who would eat them would never appreciate the effort behind it. Then I stood at the register. The total, $236. I held my breath, not because the number was big, but because I knew this was only the beginning. Shampoo, diapers, snacks, sunscreen, fruit, meat, drinks. All the things they considered the bare minimum. When I walked out of the store, I had only a few dollars left in my wallet. I set the bags in the back seat, closed the door, and leaned against the car. I needed a moment, just one moment to keep myself from breaking. I looked up at the sky. White clouds drifted slowly across the mountain peaks like a thin piece of silk, and I wondered how my life, a life that had finally found a home, could be shaken by one single phone call. I bit my lip. No crying. Not again. I took a deep breath and got into the car. It was almost time. As I drove back up the mountain road, I saw dust rising in the distance. I knew, no, I felt it. They were here. My car stopped in front of the cabin. The moment I stepped out, I heard it from down the road. A child crying, adults shouting and laughing, car doors slamming shut. I carried the grocery bags toward the cabin. My heart pounded, fearful, cold. Not because I disliked people, but because I knew the truth. The moment they set foot here, my life would no longer be my own. And I, the woman who just found her first taste of freedom, was about to pay the price to keep it. I hadn't even set the grocery bags onto the kitchen table when the rumble of engines echoed right outside the little wooden gate. The sound was so strong the cabin windows trembled. I looked through the window, and for a moment, it felt like the blood in my veins stopped moving. 3 big, shiny black SUVs, 1 red minivan, and a pickup truck stacked with suitcases, sleeping bags, coolers, and pool floats. A whole caravan, an actual procession. Car doors swung open at the same time, like the start of a stage show. Kids leapt out first, screaming as if they'd just been unleashed inside an amusement park. The adults followed, arms full of bags, beer, Bluetooth speakers, towels, and chaos. I stood on the porch, hands gripping the wooden railing so tightly my knuckles ached. The wind on the mountainside blew through my hair, but inside, there was nothing, just emptiness. "Grandma Clara!" One of the children sprinted toward me, cutting straight across the little flower pots I had watered that morning, stepping directly on a purple bloom I had carried so carefully from town. I bent down instinctively, but all I found was a crushed petal smeared under a dirty sneaker. Behind them, Lillian's voice shrilled across the yard, loud, sharp, performative. "Kids! Be careful with Grandma's things!" But it was the kind of half-hearted warning no one hears, and no one intends to follow. On the steps, Damon Lillian's brother-in-law walked toward me and slapped a heavy hand onto my shoulder as if we were longtime drinking buddies. "Clara, this is gorgeous. Perfect cabin for a getaway. We're starving. What's for lunch?" The first question, not, "How are you?" Not, "Are you settling in okay?" Just, "What's for lunch?" God, I had barely a few dollars left in my wallet, but I smiled, a thin, practiced smile. Because I was used to this. I'd been used to it my whole life. Ariel came over next, holding a toddler who was fussing from the heat. "Mom, we need the big bedroom for the kids. The youngest cries at night. You don't mind letting us have the master, right?" The master bedroom, the one I'd made this morning, the room where I imagined waking up every day, looking out at the green valleys. My heart sank. Before I could speak, Lillian appeared. Her voice, already sharp, felt even sharper after a long trip. "Mom, did you set up the rooms? Like I said, Ariel gets the master. Jason and I take the second bedroom. You'll sleep on the sofa." The sofa I hadn't even wiped down yet. I opened my mouth to protest, but Lillian had moved on, barking orders. "Bring the luggage in. Jason, put the cold stuff in Mom's fridge. We'll do a big barbecue tonight." Jason hoisted the giant cooler and marched inside. I followed him, my stomach tightening. Wait, the fridge, but it was too late. He opened it, took out everything I had bought, the cheap, humble groceries I had stretched my money to buy, and set them aside on the table. Gotta make room for the beer and meat. Beer, meat, things I couldn't afford for them, things they automatically assumed I would have. I stared at the sad little pile of food, my food, sitting helplessly on the table like evidence of my small, fragile life. I couldn't speak. My chest tightened until it hurt. Outside, the kids kept screaming. One jumped onto my new swing. Another smacked the pine tree beside the cabin. 2 older kids ran across the yard, trampling every flower I had carefully brought from town. I shouted without thinking, "Please don't step on Grandma's flowers." But Noah, Ariel's husband, just laughed. "Let 'em play, Clara. Mountain air is good for them. Those plants will grow back." Those plants were my joy, my new beginning. And now they were just debris under someone's shoes. Inside, the settling in began, which really meant throwing suitcases everywhere, opening the TV, blasting music, fighting over bathrooms, arguing over beds, and claiming spaces that weren't theirs. I felt swallowed by a flood of people who were supposed to be family, but felt more like strangers invading a place I had worked so hard for. I stood in a living room, hand pressed to my chest because my heart was racing, not from age, but from the overwhelming feeling of being dominated, dismissed, used. Lillian walked toward me, eyes scanning me like I was a problem she needed to solve. "Mom, why didn't you start lunch? Everyone's hungry and you're just standing there." I lifted my head. In that moment, I saw it clearly. Lillian didn't see a mother. She saw a responsibility, or worse, a tool. "There wasn't space in the fridge," I said quietly. "I didn't." "Oh my God, Mom, you need to be more organized. There are almost 20 people here." People I never invited. People who never once asked if I had the strength or the money to host them. I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. I didn't know how to handle this. I'd never learned how to say no. Not to Lillian, not to her in-laws, not to anyone who saw me as a floor they could walk on. Jason called from the kitchen. "Clara, your kitchen's tiny. You'll need to buy another cutting board, more knives, a bigger pot tomorrow." Buy. With whose money? But I didn't ask, because I already knew their answer. You have to take care of family. It's your job. Stop being selfish. I walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. Cold water ran over my trembling hands. It felt like the last bit of calm I had left. I inhaled deeply, swallowed the bitterness, muttered under my breath. Just 2 weeks, Clara. Just 2 weeks. But I knew 2 weeks for them could become 2 years for me. 2 years of exhaustion, of loss, of being drained and used. I looked out the window. Children were running wild, crushing the flowers, kicking up dirt. The adults were already opening beers, laughing loudly. A few had even gone into my bedroom, opening my drawers, placing their things on my dresser, as if they owned the place. And then I felt something. Small, faint, but undeniably real. A spark of anger? A flicker of dignity? A whisper that said, "Clara, it's time." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. My heart was pounding, but this time not from fear. From something else, something I had lost years ago, and something I was finally feeling again. When I walked back into the kitchen, the entire cabin was already overflowing with noise. Kids screaming, 3 or 4 overlapping conversations. My bedroom door opening and closing again and again, as if someone were checking every drawer to see what they could use. I set the grocery bags on the counter. I had planned something simple: a pot of pasta, a bit of tomato sauce, some chopped vegetables. A modest lunch, but it was all I could do with the little money I had left. I turned on the stove and filled a pot with water. My hands shook, not from exhaustion, but from the feeling of being pushed into a responsibility I never agreed to carry. A voice came from behind me. "Clara, what are you cooking?" I turned. Damon stood there, squinting at the pot as though I'd done something offensive. "Pasta," I replied. "I didn't have time to prepare much." Damon grimaced. "That's it? With all these people here and you're making pasta?" I wanted to say, "Because I only have 4 plates, half a bag of rice, and a few dollars left in my wallet." But nothing came out. Silence had been my armor for too many years. Behind him, Ariel was changing her baby's diaper. Right on my dining table. I wanted to ask her not to, that it was where I prepared food, but my throat tightened, trapping every word. All I could do was watch the dirty baby wipe land exactly where I had wiped the table clean that morning. "Clara," Ariel said without looking up, "this afternoon, Mom needs to pick up a few things for me." She handed me a list scribbled on a napkin. Diapers, formula, wipes, bug repellent, baby lotion, headache medicine, cotton pads. I stared at the paper, then at the diaper on my table, then at my tiny kitchen. Finally, I inhaled deeply. "Honey, I don't have the money to—" "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic," Ariel cut in, her voice breezy and dismissive. "It's just basics. Doesn't cost much. Doesn't cost much to them. It was everything to me. The water began to boil, and I dropped the pasta in. For the first time in my life, the smell of cooking noodles made me nauseous. Not because of the food, but because I was being shoved into the exact role they wanted. The cook, the cleaner, the servant. I started plating the portions. 4 plates weren't enough, so I used bowls, cups, even the lid of a pot for the kids. When I set them on the table, Noah looked at his serving and blurted, "This is it? No meat? No chicken or beef?" I opened my mouth to explain. "You all came so suddenly, I didn't have time or the money." But before the sentence could leave my lips, Jason chimed in. "Clara, we know you always want to take care of the family. Isn't that what you've always said? So, push yourself a little more this time." Push myself more? I'd pushed my whole life. Pushed until I had nothing left for me. Pushed until I was surviving this month on a few $100s. Pushed until 68 years old and still being treated like hired help. My eyes stung, but I swallowed it down. In front of me, one of the kids dumped pasta onto the floor because they didn't like the sauce. Another rummaged through my cabinets looking for the cookies I had saved for tomorrow's breakfast. The adults were discussing lake plans and barbecue for the evening, acting as though this cabin was theirs to use, rearrange, and consume. Not one thank you. Not one, are you okay? Not even, have you eaten? I stepped back, standing in the corner of the kitchen, watching it all, from a distance, as though I were a stranger trapped in a family that didn't recognize me. Lunch ended in chaos. No one cleared the table. No one washed a dish. Lillian walked over, hand on her hip, her tone dripping with irritation. "Mom, seriously, you need to be more prepared. We came here to relax, not to stress about this stuff." I looked at my daughter. The child I once rocked to sleep, nursed through fevers, and saved every penny for so she could go to school. Now she looked at me like I was supposed to fit into the mold she created, a mother who never gets tired, never says no, never has needs of her own. "What else do you want me to do?" I whispered. Lillian sighed, disappointed. "Know your role, Mom. This is my family. You have to help." Your family, not our family. A simple sentence sharp as a blade. I turned away. If I cried in front of them, I'd lose even more ground. I stepped out onto the porch. The mountain air rushed across my face, drying the burn in my eyes. I looked up at the sky blue, peaceful, beautiful, the same sky I once dreamed of growing old under. But now, on the very first afternoon, I could already feel it. This cabin wasn't a place to live anymore. It had become a place to endure. Inside, laughter echoed. The TV blared. Suitcases dragged across the wooden floor. All of it felt distant, drifting away. And in that small pocket of silence, I heard something inside me. A crack. I stood there, hand gripping the porch railing, and I knew I had reached a limit. Not the limit of physical strength, the limit of self-respect. I whispered to myself, softly enough that only the wind could hear. "Clara, it's time." I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I only knew one thing. If I stayed silent any longer, I'd lose the very life I'd spent decades trying to reclaim. And for the first time in many, many years, I felt something stir inside me. Small, quiet, but real. Strength. That night, as the sun sank behind the Blue Ridge Range, my cabin no longer felt like a cabin. It felt like a loud, crowded train station, full of breath, footsteps, and noise from nearly 20 people who didn't see this place as mine at all. The master bedroom glowed with light long after dark. Ariel and her 3 children sprawled across the bed I once dreamed I'd sleep in. Their things were thrown everywhere, on the bench, on the floor, even across the wooden dresser I'd polished that morning. The door stayed half open, and each time the wind blew, I heard a mix of crying toddlers and adults arguing about breakfast plans. The second bedroom had already been claimed hours earlier by Lillian and Jason. I heard her laughing inside, a familiar sound, one that should have warmed me. But tonight, it only reminded me of one thing. I had been pushed out. And the small sofa in the living room, That was what remained for me. I spread out the old blanket I'd brought from my apartment, still carrying the faint smell of cheap detergent. The sofa was too short, forcing me to curl my knees up. My back began aching the moment I lay down, but I stayed still, trying not to draw any attention. In the dark, every sound felt louder. The snap of a beer can opening. Kids screaming in the yard even though the sun had fully set. The fridge opening and closing as they searched for more snacks. Damon's voice booming. "Tomorrow we barbecue for real. Claire's got to get more ribs and steaks." I stayed motionless, a shadow inside my own home. 11 p.m. Lights still on, no one slowing down. Midnight, the TV blared a sports show. Jason laughed loudly from the living room, tossing snack wrappers onto the table. 12:40 a.m. Finally, the noise softened. But they didn't turn off the TV, they left it running on low volume, the blue light reflecting against the wooden walls like a cold strip of steel. I rolled onto my side, pain shooting up my back. "Clara, tonight is just like this," I whispered to myself. "Tomorrow will be better." But even I didn't believe that. I closed my eyes and tears slipped out, not out of sadness, but exhaustion. Exhaustion from being treated as if I didn't matter. Exhaustion from a lifetime of saying yes and being taken advantage of every single time. Around 2 a.m., a child cried out from the master bedroom. Footsteps thudded, whispers grew sharper, then into arguments. I opened my eyes. The living room was dim, only the blue TV glow brushing across my feet. Then I heard Ariel. "The baby peed all over the mattress. What do we do now? Does Clara have something to clean this?" A voice replied casually, "Clara will handle it." Automatic, effortless, like I was a machine that ran 24/7. I turned my face into the back of the sofa to hide another tear. I slept 3 hours, barely. When I finally sat up, pain radiated through my spine. Outside the window, dawn settled over the cabin, a pale, tired light, a fragile moment of calm before the chaos began again. I dragged myself to the kitchen, made a cup of instant coffee. The weak smell didn't wake me, but it reminded me I had to stand my ground today. I had just reached for the door when I heard footsteps. Noah was already in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge as if it belonged to him. "Clara, the kids want cereal. You got any?" I spoke softly, calmly. "I don't have cereal." He turned to me with disbelief, as if I told him something outrageous. "No cereal? Then what are the kids supposed to eat? Bread?" I wanted to say, "It's the only thing I can afford with the money I have left," but the word stuck. "You can make eggs," I offered gently. "Eggs? With the 6 you have left?" Noah scoffed. "Clara, that's not enough. Why don't you go into town and get cereal, milk, fruit, and some yogurt for the kids?" I looked at the fridge, crowded with their groceries. The food I bought yesterday was pushed into a wrinkled bag in the corner. "Honey," I said carefully, "I don't have much money left." Noah waved the issue away. "It doesn't take much, maybe a couple hundred. Besides, we still need meat for the barbecue." A couple hundred, just a couple hundred. To them, I was limitless. Limitless in money, limitless in energy, limitless in what I was expected to give. Ariel walked in, holding her fussy toddler. "Clara, I left the baby's dirty clothes in the basket near the bathroom. Can you wash them? They smell. And don't let the laundry pile up. It's really bad if it sits." She looked at me with an expectation so casual, so normal, as if my only purpose was to serve her family. I nodded slightly, not because I agreed, but because I didn't have the strength to argue. Lillian appeared last, coming downstairs from my bedroom, wearing the cardigan I'd left draped over the chair. "Mom, can you make pancakes this morning? Jason loves pancakes, and the kids want some too." I looked at my daughter, and a bitter ache spread through me. "Lillian," I said quietly, "I only have a little flour and a few eggs." She blinked, then scoffed. "You didn't prepare anything? You knew we were coming." I held on to my patience. "You all came, without warning." Lillian crossed her arms, shifting into her usual tone of scolding disappointment. "Mom, we're family. You have an obligation." I heard that word for the second time in 2 days. Obligation, obligation, obligation. I looked around my cabin. The mess, the damp towels, Kids fighting, adults complaining about being hungry. The fridge door slamming, suitcases dragging across my floor that I once loved. Then I looked at my hands, shaking slightly, not from fear, but from clarity. Sharp, bright, undeniable clarity. I couldn't live like this another day. Not one more day. Not one more hour. Not one more minute. I had endured my whole life. And now, this moment, in this crowded kitchen, among all the demands, I knew, if I stayed silent again, I would disappear entirely from my own life. I set the coffee cup down, looked straight at Lillian, Noah, Ariel, and I exhaled. A cold breeze swept through the porch, rattling the curtains. A cold morning, a heavy morning, and the first morning in my life when I thought, Clara, it's time to stand up. It's time to reclaim your life. I grabbed my car keys and my wallet thin and light as a folded receipt and stepped out of the cabin, while the sounds of crying kids and shouting adults echoed behind me. No one asked where I was going. No one wondered why I stepped out the door. They were too busy, demanding. No one knew I had only a handful of dollars left. No one knew my back hurt so badly after a night on the sofa that I struggled to breathe. No one knew how many years I'd scraped and saved to buy this house, and how fast they were destroying it before I even had the chance to make it a home. My car rolled down the dirt road toward town. I drove in silence. No radio, no window cracked open. Just the sound of my heartbeat, steady in a way that belongs to someone standing at the edge of something dangerous. Halfway down, I stopped at a little cafe I'd passed yesterday. A wooden sign hung in front, Maple Ridge Cafe, home of kind coffee. I pushed the door open. The bell above chimed softly, a gentler sound than anything I'd heard in the last 48 hours. Inside were only a few older locals sipping their morning coffee. Sunlight spilled through the windows, laying soft stripes of light across the wooden floor. A woman around 50, with a calm face and kind eyes, stepped up to the counter. "Good morning. What can I get you?" I opened my mouth, but my throat was so dry that only a faint sound escaped. Hot coffee, black." She smiled warmly. "Coming right up." I sat by the window. When she set the cup down in front of me, steaming, dark, gentle, I held onto it tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me from sinking. "Are you all right?" Her voice came quietly as she placed a napkin in front of me. "You look like you're carrying something heavy." I let out a weak laugh, a sound I barely recognized as my own. "I'm going through something with my family," I said. She nodded slowly, her voice soft as a breeze. "Ah, family. Sometimes they hurt us more than strangers ever could." I lifted my eyes. That sentence, too true, too sharp, hit me like a direct arrow. "I just bought a house," I said quietly. "After years of saving, and then my daughter showed up with nearly 20 people. No warning, no permission. They're eating, sleeping, using everything like I'm a staff member. I can't keep up." She stood silent for a moment before saying, "You know, what you're describing isn't a family visit. It's abuse." I felt the air around me thicken. Abuse. The word struck the center of my chest. She continued, "I've seen this before. Older folks being drained, financially, emotionally, physically, and they stay quiet because they think it's their duty. But honey, duty doesn't include being treated badly." I lowered my head. The cup warmed my hands, but my heart felt strangely cold. "Do you know anyone in town?" she asked. "No," I whispered. "I just moved here." She didn't hesitate. "Have you spoken to a lawyer?" I froze. "A lawyer? For what?" She tilted her head, eyes sharpening with clarity. "To understand your rights, that house is yours. That property is yours. If they're staying without your permission, that's trespassing, and they can't force you to spend your money on them." It felt like she was speaking a language I had never learned, a language where I had power, a language where I had rights. Rights. I had forgotten that word. She grabbed a scrap of paper and scribbled something on it. This is the attorney we use here in town, Jeremy Cole. He's good, and he's handled cases like yours. I took the paper, my hand trembled. Thank you. The words slipped out like breath. She smiled kindly. If you ever need anything, just come back. Don't suffer by yourself. I left the cafe with the warm cup in hand and a heaviness in my chest. But for the first time in years, it was a heaviness that made things clearer. The small mountain town was calm in the morning light, so quiet it felt almost pure. I stood in front of a simple sign, Cole and Associates, Family Law. I drew a long breath and gripped the door handle. Inside, Jeremy, a man in his early 50s, neat, calm, with a face that carried both gentleness and authority, stood to greet me. Good morning. How can I help you? I sat down, more awake than I had felt in years, and then, like a faucet bursting open, everything poured out. Lillian's phone call, the 19 uninvited guests, the food, the money, the noise, the toddler peeing on my bed, my night on the sofa, them treating my home like a hotel, the criticism, the endless demands. I couldn't stop talking. Jeremy didn't interrupt. He only nodded, jotting down a few notes. When I finally finished, he set his pen down and spoke with a certainty that made my skin prickle. What you're describing, legally, falls under financial exploitation and emotional abuse. I held my breath. You don't just have rights, he added. You have the right to set boundaries, to refuse, and to ask them to leave if you didn't invite them. I trembled, not from fear, but from hearing, maybe for the first time in my life, someone stand on my side. Jeremy handed me a thin packet. This is a residency notice. He looked directly at me. If you give them this, they must either pay for their stay or leave. I stared at the paper. My hand shook. Just a simple document, a tool, a way to protect what's mine. A tiny spark, but enough to show me a path forward. Jeremy walked me to the door. Mrs. Winslow, he said gently, you're not alone, and you're not wrong. People take advantage only when they know you're too kind to fight back. I stepped outside. The sky was clear. The mountain air brushed against my face. Something inside me broke, and something else rebuilt itself in the same breath. I had stayed silent too long, given too much. And now, it was time to take my life back. I climbed into my car, the packet resting on my lap. The cabin on the mountaintop was waiting, but this time, I wasn't returning to endure it. I was returning to change everything. As my car climbed back up the mountain road, the familiar dirt path unfolded ahead of me. Through the trees, I saw my cabin, the little wooden shape tucked into the quiet green of the pines, and my chest tightened. The scenery was still as beautiful as it had been that morning, only now, I wasn't seeing it with the eyes of a frightened woman anymore. On the passenger seat lay the packet Jeremy had given me, neatly tucked inside its blue cover. Just a simple stack of papers, yet I knew it held something I had never truly owned before. The right to say, enough. When I pulled up to the porch, the scene before me was almost laughable in its cruelty. Kids were throwing rocks down the slope, stones bouncing off the cabin railing, scraping long marks into the wood. On the porch, Rowena and Jolene were stacking drinks, leaving cases of beer scattered across the ground. Noah was rummaging through the storage bins outside, pulling out my gardening tools so the kids could play. No one noticed I'd returned. No one asked where I'd gone. No one offered to help carry anything. I walked into the cabin. Inside, the place looked so chaotic I almost didn't recognize it as the dream I had once held onto. Clothes draped over chairs, dirty diapers in a corner, half-finished beer cans on the TV stand. Footprints everywhere on the wooden floor I'd cleaned that same morning. I stood there for a long moment, letting my heart memorize this scene, so I'd never forget how bad it had gotten. Then I heard Lillian's voice from my bedroom. "Mom, you're back? Why'd you take so long? Jason's starving." Starving. Meanwhile, I'd skipped lunch, driven half the mountain, bought groceries, and met with a lawyer. I didn't answer her. I only walked straight to the kitchen. Jason was digging through the fridge, holding the last bottle of juice I bought yesterday. Clara, thank God you're back. Did you get the beef? We're doing BBQ tonight. I opened my wallet and placed it gently on the counter. Empty except for a few coins. No, I said. No one noticed the weight of that word when it hit the room. They only stared at me as if I had rejected a sacred duty. Lillian walked over, arms crossed, eyes tight with annoyance. Mom, I told you this morning. With this many people, you can't just half do things. I turned to her, and for the first time, I didn't lower my eyes. Why, I asked slowly, am I supposed to take care of everything? The air tightened, thin as a thread pulled to breaking. Lillian blinked, clearly not used to hearing questions from me. Mom, because we're family, you have a responsibility. I held up my hand. She stopped mid-sentence. No, I said softly but firmly. It doesn't work like that. Jason let out a dry laugh, impatient, dismissive. Clara, you're scaring us. This is just a family trip. A trip. A vacation funded by my money, my back, my home. I placed Jeremy's packet on the table. A soft sound, yet enough to make everyone turn. What's that? Damon asked, squinting at the folder. I opened it and laid out the papers one by one on the table, like evidence in a courtroom. The $236 receipt from yesterday, my monthly grocery receipts, my bank balance, barely a few $100s left. And on top, the residency notice, printed clearly. Property owner residency terms and fees issued by Cole & Associates. Silence dropped like a heavy curtain. Even the kids quieted down, sensing a shift in the air. I said, in 48 hours, I've spent over $500 feeding people I never invited. I can't afford this, and I cannot keep being treated like a servant. Ariel blinked, face paling. Clara, you're freaking us out. I looked straight at her. This isn't about you all, this is about me. I placed my hand on the papers. Starting today, staying in this cabin is conditional. No one moved. I spoke clearly, my voice steady. If you stay, each adult pays $50 a day to cover utilities and food. Children $30. Bedrooms $100 per night. Jason shot to his feet. What? You're charging us? I'm not charging you, I said. I'm giving you a choice. Lillian's voice cracked. Mom, you can't do this. We're your family. I nodded slowly, and my answer sliced through the room like a blade. Real family wouldn't treat me this way. The cabin fell into a deep, suffocating silence. Rowena spoke next, her voice trembling with offended pride. Clara, this is too much. We're just visiting. I turned to her. Visiting means asking before you come. Visiting means bringing food. Visiting means cleaning up after yourself. This, I gestured around, is exploitation. The tension was so thick it felt like a hand pressing against my chest. Damon tried to soften his tone. Clara, we didn't mean to upset you. Why make this such a big deal? Because for the first time, I said, I'm naming how I feel. I looked around, meeting every pair of eyes. I'm 68 years old. I lost my husband. I saved nearly my whole life to buy this cabin. I never asked any of you for help, but I won't let anyone destroy it. Lillian stepped closer, her voice cracking. Mom, are you choosing your house over us? I met her eyes, and I knew it was a look she had never seen from me. No, I'm choosing myself. The room fell into a silence so deep it felt like the bottom of a lake. Then I spoke the words I had never been brave enough to say in all my years. If you won't agree to the terms, you may leave. Today. Lillian froze. Jason stared as if I'd spoken a foreign language. Ariel clutched her baby tighter, horrified. Noah's face flushed red with anger. But for the first time in many, many years, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't shrinking. I stood tall, hands slightly shaking, but my eyes unwavering. I was done being a shadow in my own life. For a few seconds after I spoke those final words, the air inside the cabin thickened, heavy, damp, pressing against my chest like a wet blanket. No one moved. No one blinked. Even the children went silent, as if the room had been vacuum sealed. And then, like a stone smashing through frozen water, everything shattered at once. Lillian burst into tears first, not the kind of tears that come from real pain, but the kind meant to draw sympathy, the kind she'd mastered over the years. "Mom, do you really not love us anymore?" Her voice trembled just enough to make anyone feel guilty. "You've lived here barely a month, and already you care more about this house than your own family?" Jason stepped forward, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, his tone sharpening. "Clara, this is ridiculous. We came here to bring you some joy. You think anyone wants to come all the way up here just to ruin your house?" The irony was almost comedic. I looked at the scratched floors, the dirty diaper in the corner, the chopping board hacked to splinters, the empty fridge, and wondered what joy they were talking about. Ariel stepped in, clutching her baby as if protecting him from danger. "Clara, I can't believe you'd charge your own daughter and your own grandchildren. This is deeply hurtful." Hurtful. The word fell from her mouth as if they were the ones who had been abandoned, mistreated, thrown out, not me, who had been sleeping on a sofa. From the back, Noah's face flushed red with indignation. "So that's why you didn't buy anything this morning? No eggs? No cereal? You planned this, didn't you?" I stared at him. I had never seen someone twist reality so quickly. I didn't buy anything because I had no money left. But in their minds, I was some mastermind plotting revenge. "No," I said slowly. "I just couldn't." Jason cut me off, voice dry and sharp. "Couldn't or wouldn't." From the corner, Rowena chimed in, eyes watery. "I thought you, Clara, of all people, wanted a family gathering, and now you're treating us like strangers, like freeloaders. This is insulting." Jolene nodded vigorously. "If you didn't want us here, you should have said something, not wait until we drove 100 miles just to kick us out like strays." I stayed silent, not because I lacked words, but because the truth had finally crystallized. They only loved me when I served them. The moment I set a boundary, they became the victims, as if my exhaustion was my fault, as if my poverty was selfishness, as if my back pain from sleeping on a sofa meant nothing next to their feelings. I looked at Lillian. She was still crying, but her hand was gripping the sleeve of my cardigan, the cardigan she had taken from my room as if it belonged to her. "Mom," Lillian sobbed, "you can't do this to me. You're the only parent I have. This feels like betrayal." I inhaled, a long, steady breath. "You think I'm the one betraying you?" I asked quietly. Lillian nodded, tears falling like she was the lead actress in her favorite drama. I met her eyes. "Do you know where I've slept the last 2 nights?" She froze. "Do you remember who cooked, cleaned, washed your laundry, watched the kids, made breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Do you remember who paid for everything while none of you contributed a single dollar?" Lillian bit her lip but said nothing. I continued. "Do you remember whose bedroom, the bedroom I saved my entire life for, is being used right now? Who's sleeping in my bed, using my pillows, my towels, my dresser?" Ariel blinked fast. I only borrowed." "It's not borrowing," I said. "It's taking." Noah shot up. "Clara, you're blowing this way out of proportion." I turned to him. Out of proportion? Or finally close to the truth? The room went still. Still in a way that told me everyone knew, even if they'd never admit it, that I wasn't wrong. But pride is a stubborn creature. Jason crossed his arms, leaning back with a smirk. "So what now? You gonna wave those papers at us and threaten us?" I placed the packet back on the table. "These papers aren't a threat. They're my rights." Damon let out a short, bitter laugh. "Rights? Claire, you've lived alone for years. You should be grateful your family even wants to be here." I looked at him. That familiar line, the one I'd heard for decades. You should be grateful. You're lucky to have family. They came because they love you. But if love was the reason, why did it hurt this much? I stepped closer to the table, fingers brushing the wood. My voice was soft, but each word landed like stone. You came because you love me, or because it's free? No one replied. You came because you care, or because you know I wouldn't dare say no? Lillian's crying grew louder, the sound of someone who wasn't getting what she wanted. Ariel clutched her baby tighter, face red with panic. Noah avoided my eyes. Jason clenched his jaw to keep words from spilling out. But I saw the truth more clearly than anything they were trying to say. They weren't angry because I was wrong. They were angry because I had stopped playing the role of the obedient, invisible woman. I straightened my back. You have two choices, I said. Sign or leave. No one moved. No one reached for a pen. Then, right on cue, Lillian delivered the blow she thought would break me.
Mom, you've changed. You've become controlling, cold, and selfish. You're not the mother I know.
The words hit me, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything. My daughter only loved the version of me that was quiet, small, and easily used. I swallowed, then answered in a voice soft as wind. You're right. I'm not the mother I used to be. Lillian looked up, eyes swollen. I repeated. Because I refuse to spend the rest of my life afraid, in my own home. A gust of wind hit the porch, rattling the windows, as if the whole mountainside was witnessing this moment. I looked at each of them again and said, I'm going to town one more time. When I come back, I want your decision. Silence, heavy, unmoving. I turned toward the door. My hand touched the knob when Lillian's voice sliced through the room, ice cold. If you walk out that door, don't expect me to call you Mom again. I paused for half a second. I didn't bow my head. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. Then I opened the door and walked straight out. The mountain wind hit me, colder, stronger, but it carried something else too. Something light, something new. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't look back. The wind on the mountainside whipped against my face as the wooden door closed behind me. For the first time in years, I didn't hear anyone calling after me. No one ran to grab my arm. No one begged me to stay. No one cried to make me change my mind. Nothing, just silence. A strange kind of silence, but not as frightening as I once imagined. It felt more like a beginning. I walked down the worn stone steps onto the dirt road that led to the main path. My car was parked under an old pine tree, cold to the touch but familiar like the last friend still on my side. As I opened the door and slid into the driver's seat, a shiver ran down my spine. Not from the cold, but from knowing this: if I turned the car around right now, everything would go back to the way it was. My daughter would cry again. My son-in-law would pretend to understand. The others would slip back into their victim roles. And I would disappear back into my own shadow. I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath, then turned the key. The weak but steady hum of the engine sounded like quiet encouragement. I drove down into town. That morning, the town was wrapped in a thin veil of white mist, like a bridal veil someone had forgotten. Tiny wooden storefronts glistened with beads of water. When I pulled up in front of a cafe called Ridgeview Brew, I felt like my life had just split into two separate chapters, before today and after today. There were only a few people inside, locals sipping their morning coffee before work. The bell above the door chimed softly as I walked in. The woman behind the counter, short salt and pepper hair, a gentle smile, took one look at my face and knew. Well, you don't look okay, she said, her voice soft like an old wool blanket. Sit down, I'll get you something warm. I sat at a small wooden table by the window. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the feeling that I had just walked out of a battlefield. A few minutes later, she placed a mug of hot cocoa in front of me. My name's Marion. I've worked here almost 20 years. You're new up in Cedar Ridge, right? I nodded slightly. Yes, just moved a few weeks ago. Marian studied me for a moment, her gaze deep. Like someone who'd seen more broken hearts than she could count walk through that door. She didn't pry. She didn't interrogate. She just said the one thing I needed in that moment. "Wanna talk? If you can't say it at home, you can say it here." I laughed, a small, tired laugh, but more honest than any smile I'd forced in front of my daughter. And then, without really knowing why, I told her. I told her everything. The phone call from Lillian, the 20 people showing up, the money, the room being taken, the light little abuses that really weren't light at all, the nights on the sofa. And that moment Lillian said, "You're not my mother anymore." Marian listened without flinching. She didn't gasp, she didn't dramatize, she didn't pity me. She didn't judge me. When I finished, she laid her warm hand over mine and simply said, "You know something? Good children don't let their mother sleep on the couch." That sentence, so simple, so quiet, untied something inside my chest. I looked out the window. Droplets of mist slowly melted off the glass. Somewhere in my chest, a fog was lifting too. "But they're my family," I said, my voice sinking. "No," Marian answered gently. "They're people you gave birth to, but that doesn't automatically make them family. Family is who makes you feel safe, not the ones who drain you dry." I froze. Family is who makes you feel safe. And I was so tired that I had grown afraid of the sound of my own daughter's footsteps. After I'd nearly finished the cocoa, I got up to leave. Marian walked me to the door and said, "There's a law office down the street. Fella named Graham Alder. Good man, straightforward. Knows elder rights like the back of his hand. If you need advice, don't be afraid to talk to him." I paused for a moment. I wasn't sure I was ready, but then I remembered Noah's flushed, angry face, Damon's sharp tone, Jason's smirk. I remembered my back screaming from 2 nights on the sofa, remembered my only blanket being used as a playmat while the kids dropped crackers all over it. I had nothing left to be afraid of. I stepped out onto the street and walked toward a small red brick building with a sign that read, "Alder and Associates, Legal Services." Graham Alder was a man in his mid-50s, tall, lean, with a calm, low voice, like someone who'd sat through more human messes than he could ever recount. He offered me a seat, poured some water, and let me tell the whole story, for the second time that day. When I finished, he set his pen down and folded his arms. "Mrs. Clara," he began, "what you're describing is financial abuse, emotional abuse, and unlawful occupation of your property. They have no right to use your house like that, and certainly no right to force you to pay for them." "I know," I whispered, "but they're my children." He tilted his head. "Children are not exempt from hurting their parents. The law doesn't care if they're strangers or relatives. If they're forcing your compliance, then it's wrong." My hands felt cold, but my heart felt hot, like coal beginning to glow again. "What do I do?" I asked. He slid a thin folder toward me. "This is a 24-hour notice to vacate the property if they don't respect your conditions. And this," he added, "is a formal lodging agreement, so you can legally charge them for staying there." I brushed my fingers along the edge of the paper. It felt as fragile as my life, and yet as solid as the truths I had avoided for so long. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "What are you afraid of losing?" he asked. I stared toward the window. "Losing my daughter." Graham looked at me for a long moment, his eyes sad but unwavering. "Clara, you've already lost her. Not yesterday, not today, a long time ago. Yesterday, you just finally saw it." Tears welled up, not from heartbreak, but from something that felt suspiciously like clarity. "And you know," he went on, "if the relationship only exists as long as you're their servant, that's not love, that's a chain." I nodded, for the first time in many years feeling like I was standing upright, not bent for anyone. "I'll do it," I said, my voice firm. He gave a small smile. "Good. You're not alone in this. When I stepped out of the office, the sun had broken through. The morning mist had lifted, revealing mountain peaks glowing in the distance. I stood on the steps, folder in hand, and felt something clear and undeniable. I was taking my life back, inch by inch. I opened the car door, set the folder on the passenger seat, and whispered, "It's time." Then I turned the car around and headed back home. My heart wasn't trembling anymore. For the first time in my life, I was going back as the rightful owner of my own home. As I drove back up the winding mountain road, the folder from attorney Graham Alders sat on the passenger seat like a thin shield. But it was the first shield I'd ever had for myself. Wind slapped against the windows. Tall pines swayed as if watching my return. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like some guilty intruder sneaking back into a house where I didn't belong. I felt like the rightful owner coming home. The noise hit me before the cabin even came into view. Children screaming, adults arguing over who got which bed, doors slamming, someone blasting music in my living room, music loud enough to rattle the glass panes. I stepped out of the car, folder in hand. The front door was still wide open. Of course it was. Why close anything when it wasn't their house? Like a free resort with unlimited service, and I was the unpaid, nameless staff. I stood at the doorway for a moment, letting the chaos etch itself into my memory. I wanted to remember this scene, so I'd never forget how bad it had gotten. Then I stepped inside. Jason spotted me first. "Oh, Clara's back," he said, in the tone someone might use to greet a delivery driver. Noah came out of the kitchen, holding my box of cookies, the one I rationed out for the whole week. "So, Mom got the groceries? We're starving here." Ariel emerged from my bedroom, hair up, baby on her hip, voice annoyed. "Heater's kinda weak in your room. Make sure you get extra blankets ready for tonight." They spoke as if I owed them flawless service. Then Lillian stood up from the sofa, hands on her hips, voice cold enough to crack. "So what is it, Mom? You still planning to kick us out?" I looked at them, really looked at them. Their faces, their entitlement, their expectation that I would submit like always. But the woman standing in front of them wasn't the trembling mother they were used to. I walked to the center of the living room, placed the folder on the coffee table, and the thud that echoed out was small, yet sharp, like a judge striking a gavel. "This," I said, "is my final decision." They exchanged glances, mocking, irritated, confident that I would fold. Jason stepped closer. "Clara, come on. Don't make this dramatic. We're family." I didn't even look at him. I opened the folder. "If you want to stay," I said slowly, clearly, "these are the terms." I read aloud, my voice calm. $100 per room per night. $50 per adult per day for food. $20 per person per day for utilities. Silence. A split second later, the explosion I expected. "What?" Noah shouted, face flushing crimson. "Clara, you've lost your mind," Damon barked. "I'm not paying a penny," Ariel yelled, voice shrill. Jason slammed his palm on the table. "You treating us like we're homeless or something?" Jolene gasped dramatically. "How could you charge your own family? Clara, you've become heartless." Rowena dabbed at her eyes. "I never imagined you'd treat us like strangers, like outsiders." And then came Lillian, the family's reigning queen of manipulation. She stepped forward, looking at me like I'd betrayed all of humanity. "I just want to know one thing, Mom." Her voice quivered. "Do you still love me?" That question once had the power to break me, but today I only gave a small, sad smile. "Yes," I said, "I love you, but I do not love the way you treat me." Shock rippled across her face. Jason scoffed loudly. "So what happens if we don't pay, huh?" I slid another document across the table toward him. "If you refuse the terms," I said simply, "this is a 24-hour notice to vacate the property." The air dropped, heavy, cold, absolute. Ariel hugged her baby tighter and shrieked. "So you're throwing us out onto the street?" "No," I replied. "I'm throwing your behavior out of my life." Damon jabbed a finger in my direction. "Clara, you're being selfish to the point of sickness." I turned toward him, my voice light as a feather. Selfish is expecting 20 people to sleep comfortably in my bed while I sleep on a sofa. Noah glared. You want to start a war, Mom? No, I said. I want peace. And then Lillian, unable to handle losing control, finally erupted. She slammed her hands on the folder, sending papers flying like startled birds. I swear, you will regret this for the rest of your life. You'll die old and alone. Do you hear me? No one will ever love you again. I looked at my daughter, and for the first time, didn't crumble. I answered with a quiet steadiness I didn't know I possessed. Better alone in peace than surrounded by people who only want to use me. Not a single word followed. A heavy silence fell. I could hear the wind tapping against the windows. Then slowly, Damon gathered his things. Noah started hauling luggage. Ariel zipped up the baby bags. Jason dragged his suitcase roughly, shaking the floorboards. Lillian was last. She turned at the doorway, eyes filled with anger, hurt, and pride. I hope you understand. After today, you don't have a family anymore. I smiled gently. No, Lillian, after today, I finally have my life back. She slammed the door so hard the walls shook, and then silence. A silence so complete I could hear the trees outside exhale. An hour later, the yard was empty. No screaming children, no arguing adults, no demanding voices. Just the scent of mountain grass and the whisper of wind through the pines. I sank into the wooden chair on the porch. The breeze brushed my cheek like a late blessing. Then I saw Martha, my new neighbor, walking up the path with a basket of bread. Heard a whole storm of footsteps up here, and then suddenly, nothing, she said, squinting. Finally quiet, huh? I nodded. Yes, quiet. She placed the basket on my table. Good. Quiet is the happiest sound there is. I smiled, a real smile, warm and unforced. For the first time in years, I knew what it felt like to be home. If my story made you think of yourself, or someone you once knew, leave me a small sign by hitting the like button. And if you want to hear more journeys like this, stories about courage, boundaries, and finding yourself again at an age when the world thinks you're done, then subscribe to the channel so we can meet again in the next chapter. Thank you for being here.